Hi, so this is Dave J in LA, and today I'm at the NAMM show in Anaheim.
Dave J.
Dave J.
Oh, you? We're two Daves.
I'm Dave J. You're Dave K.
Dave K. All right.
Yeah, you're the next one along. So this is it's a bit of a breezy afternoon outdoors at the NAMM show, and I have the pleasure of talking to Dave Kerzner. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good. So for anybody not familiar, there's two sides to your musical experience. On the one hand, there's the business side, the software side, the sonic elements, and the work with IK Multimedia. Dave basically sampled some records or did vintage keyboards, drums from established musicians that you might have heard of, and recreates that sound that are used in plugins, virtual instruments, etc. And on the creative side, already established musician, he's worked with Steve Haggett, Francis Dunnery, Sound of Contact, Manda Vegra, as well as 2 studio albums in his own right. So you're obviously a very busy man.
Indeed, I am, yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into music in the first place? Are you from a musical family?
Not at all. Apart from the fact that we started with everyone in my family taking piano lessons, just for the heck of it. And then everyone quit, and including me, actually, because I didn't really the teacher was very boring and strict, and we were learning sort of very, very basic classical, and it just wasn't exciting. If I was, so I was always kind of somebody who'd want to skip ahead, so I, after just playing the piano, since we had one, making up my own songs of chaos and whatever chords I could play. I got a new teacher who would sort of just work with me and teach me what I wanted to know. So if I put on In the Cage by Genesis and said, "Can you figure this out by ear and teach it to me?" Things like that, and explain to me. So we would work in the theory and the basics that you need to know, but I would be able to skip ahead and just kind of get some extra tips to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was play the kind of music that I liked from the 70s.
How old were you at that age?
Oh God, I was, let's say, I started playing piano when I was maybe 7 or 8, but I started wanting to have a keyboard and play in a band when I was 13, 14.
Right, okay. So you started, after you started learning, you basically decided to create your own songs, write your own music?
Yeah.
Did you actually play in a band at that age, or were you just doing it for your own
amusement? I had a garage
music?
band in my garage, so that's how I learned to play other instruments too, because the drummer would leave his drum set there and I'd bash away on it when he wasn't around.
That was out in Florida? Is that right?
In Miami.
Okay.
Or Hollywood, Florida.
You didn't play with your other members of your family, your brother or anything?
No.
Just...
My brother actually works with IK Multimedia, and he's more of a businessman. He doesn't play an instrument at all, but it's great that we work together on the other side you're talking about.
So did you decide at an early age, this is what I want to do? Did you want to make a living out of that, or did you just...
Well, I probably didn't know what a living was when I was a teenager, but I definitely did dream of being in a band like Genesis or Pink Floyd, and I used to play producer because I had the recording equipment, and I would direct people around, saying, "Oh, could you do another take of that?" And my friends would be like, "Who are you in charge?"
Who is he?
But I had a vision for that and was always trying to do what I do now, but even back then. So
what sort of equipment were you using to record?
Well, I had a really nice Tascam 4-track, the high-end one, and sounded pretty good actually. And then eventually, the reel-to-reels, Fostex and Tascam. With I went to Syracuse University, and for a little while, and they had this great studio. But I got straight A's because when it came time to do my mix for this recording class, I brought in this thing called a Yamaha SPX90, which is like a multi-effects. And the teacher of the course was like, "What is that? I've heard about that." And I was always like the cutting edge. I brought in a D50 on the synthesizer.
So how did you get your hands on those things back then when you were just so young?
Well, first of all, I was very crafty. One thing, I wanted a D50, a Roland D50, and I had a DX7. And I sold my older Yamaha analog keyboards to a friend of mine, Adam Gaynor, who ended up being in Matchbox 20. And I sold that to get the DX7. And I sold the DX7 and canceled my meal plan for the college, and they gave me a few $100 and I got a D50. So when there's a will, there's a way.
I had a friend who I started my first band with. He swapped a tiny little car for a leather jacket so he would look cool on stages.
I didn't think about looking cool, but I did care about the keyboards, and from there actually, like I used to collect them when I moved to LA in '89. I started collecting them, and what happened is you could buy one and then fix it up, sell it, sample it. There's another thing I used to do, which is how I started my company, and it would sort of, your collection would grow and multiply just by buying and selling,
keeping the ones that you want,
storing them, and
And a lot of the times you don't want to let them go because they're so good.
Yeah.
How long were you in LA for?
From '89 to '99.
Okay.
10 years.
Oh, good spell then. And so is that the period when you really started, playing with other musicians and stuff?
Yeah, when I was at Syracuse, I talked to the professor. I'm still friends with one of the professors, and I said, I wanted to do everything. I actually was studying film, and I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, but my main thing was really producing and writing and playing music. And so the teacher said, listen, don't tell anybody that I told you this, but if you really want to do it, you don't really need a degree exactly. You need to just go to LA or New York or wherever, and do it. Mm-hmm. So I went to LA, and my parents are Ivy League graduates, so they were like not thrilled.
Yeah.
But I went to a school called Grove School of Music, so at least there was a school involved in this move. But, I think, in fact, it was kind of funny with my mom. For years, she was saying to me, that's nice, that's cool, but when are you going to go back to college and finish your degree? And then finally, I landed a gig with her favorite artist, which is Barbra Streisand. And after that, she never said a word.
Yeah, you'd made it in her
okay,
eyes.
Actually, if you're going to do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as I have something to tell everybody.
There's always that sort of sense of, as a kid, if you're really into music and you want to be a band, you get so excited, there's a record label in there, and your parents are like, oh, I still think you should get a proper job.
Well, and it's true. I was working with
some
artists like Crowded House or Smashing Pumpkins, but to my mom, in a different generation, Smashing Pumpkins sounds like, when are you going back to college? Like, when are you going to get serious about this? And then it just so happens that I was doing some stuff with just sound design, actually, the other side, for Madonna, and those people were offered the gig for doing a similar kind of interesting role. I was playing samples, recordings of actors' voices. I used to get these odd jobs like that because it was sort of a techie thing.
How did you get into getting those jobs? Just through contacts in recording studios?
Yeah, I think the Madonna, ironically, that happened because they were buying something for me out of the paper. They had this paper called The Recycler, sort of like a bargain trader. And, once I started talking to them, they're like, yeah, we're the guys from Madonna, we're doing this and that, and we've got this new sampler that no one had, and I'm like, really? And I'm like, well, what are you using it for? I'm like, I don't even know. And I'm like, well, I have some ideas. What about this? And I went down there, I met Mike McKnight and all these great people. Mike does the sound does the keyboards and sequencing and everything, the computers for Roger Waters' The Wall and all sorts of tours. And so, that's how I met all those people. And then once you get that opportunity, you sort of just to offer your services. And that was kind of like that guy in LA who just, if you needed something quirky with technology, I could be that guy. So that led to a lot of other things, and it led to me starting my company Sonic Reality as well.
And that you just, through playing these vintage keyboards and keyboards where you just thought it would be great to recreate that, or actually, these are becoming extinct, how can we capture that?
Yeah, that's true. Also, what it was really born out of me sampling them was I could only fit so many in my studio, and that's why, and also this kind of like revolving door of, well, I want this other thing, so it's like I got to get rid of this thing to pay for that other thing or to make room for it. So the sampling technology, which is the ability to record an instrument or anything digitally and then kind of have it saved so you can play it from a keyboard with that authentic sound. I did it for my own reasons at first, and then other artists needed that too, like Crowded House had all these sounds from an instrument called the Chamberlin, and the Optica, which is like a Mellotron, which is very popular in progressive rock music. And they didn't want to take a Chamberlain on the road. So I sampled the Chamberlain for them. I also did that for Smashing Pumpkins. So, and other artists, so that when they toured, they could have the sounds from the records without bringing the original fragile vintage instruments on the road. So it ended up being, for my own purposes as a songwriter, producer, and musician, and a collector as well, to kind of like collect the sounds if you can't always physically have a massive collection. Because if I kept everything I ever had, it would be a museum. It still is anyway.
And did you ever think it would be sort of just so commonplace now to use that technology? Because everybody can record at home now using.
It's interesting. I mean, I have, my history with the MI industry, as we call it, the musical instrument industry, is such that I was around from the very beginning of that kind of stuff, and I provided sounds for Roland for their vintage expansion boards, and Alesis, and did programming for Yamaha, and so many things over the years and of course with IK Multimedia, the software with Sample Tank and everything, and it's I sort of rode the wave of the revolution of being able to make music inside a computer, essentially, with a full studio, and certainly the instrument side, I've had a part in that, and of course I use it myself. So I mean, I think I did have that vision of just as I saw the ability to do it. I thought, because I was the one who came up with the slogan for IK Multimedia, which is musicians first. And this is something that's just kind of like, when you're a musician, you look at the technology and you're a songwriter and everything as like, well, if I could do this, that would be really great. And so being part of it, but also being a musician, I could affect it with the companies that I worked for, that provided sounds for, to say, this would be great if we could do this, and now we can. So, it's obviously come a long way to the point where you can make a record for free with GarageBand that comes with Apple or something. But it's nice actually also to come from the world where you had to use tape and you had a limited amount of.
You had to be creative.
Exactly. And so, I also try to, because I'm kind of like, I'm not totally old school, but I'm not totally like, somebody who was brought up without those things. Try to remind people to appreciate that, as you're flipping through sounds, one might be a pipe organ, and somebody had to set up, in this cathedral, all these mics to just do like a session, and it's like, well, here it is, or like a session with Neil Peart, for instance, which now even Rush doesn't work with Neil, but we sampled Neil and with Nick Raskulinix, who's Rush's producer. We recorded him playing, and you can use that in your own music. And this is just something that's like amazing, exciting.
Brings a whole new world of creativity. But the other side of that is just like there are so many choices now. With your fingertips. If you wanted a specific sound before, there were only certain keyboards that could create that sound. Now, there's like 150 different church organ sounds or something like that.
And what my answer to that is? Because we can have option anxiety, essentially, from all that. As long as the song is the most important thing, then everything else falls into place. You use what you're comfortable with. This is what I do. I mean, I own tons of gear, tons of it still, and I've been trying to thin it out. And I love musical instruments, and I love equipment, and I love to read about, what did the Beatles use on, mixing and all these different things. And I've worked with people who recorded the Beatles, like Ken Scott, who's here, and Alan Parsons, what did he use for Dark Side of the Moon? And so it's fascinating educationally, and it's cool to collect it or, have it in software, hardware, whatever you got. But when I work on music, like you mentioned this other side, where which, by the way, I kind of rekindled, which in the 90s in LA, I was way into doing music, and then for, from the 2000, about 5 years, I was kind of more just building my business and getting that going. I started doing music as a hobby, creating tools for people to make music with, and then after a while, I was like, wait a minute. Like, you can't lose the point. Like you have to balance making music, find the time. You go around the NAMM show and you talk to a lot of musicians who are got a suit on and they're busy, selling the stuff. It's like, yeah, but it's important. Like, why did you do this in the first place? Because you wanted to sell music, or you wanted to actually make it.
Yeah.
So I made a concerted effort to do that, and as I was doing that, and still had all this technology at my disposal, all this gear, I realized, you know what serves the song? You can grab anything. I'll grab a trash can and bang on it, if that serves the song.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the answer to anybody who's looking at everything and they're overwhelmed, is just be like, listen, don't worry about it. You could do it on whatever you want, whatever you feel it sounds right to you.
Yeah.
And you don't have time really to search through every option and do everything. You don't worry about it. We were just talking about this in the presentation we just did, is when the person's listening, they don't know what you use.
Yeah, it either sounds right or it doesn't.
Yeah.
So can you talk us a little bit how you got involved with your work with Genesis when you...
I'm a huge Genesis fan. I always have.
As am I. Yeah.
And, I remember in what do I want to say, like 1997 or 6, I created a product called Vintage Time Traveler, which is a really cool sample library of all the stuff that, let's say Tony Banks would have used, and, all the, ARP synthesizers, Mellotrons, RMI, CP70. And I remember thinking at that time, like, I bet you Tony would like this. But there was no internet.
Yeah.
And there was just, no way for me to get it to him. I didn't know the address of the farm or anything like that. And I wasn't, I never had no connections to Genesis at all. And, but something had happened. Maybe this was a bit earlier than that, actually, the early 90s, because right around then they were doing Calling All Stations, or they were auditioning for Calling All Stations. And I suggested Nick DiVirgilio online on some kind of news group thing that they had, and he ended up getting the gig.
Right.
And then I went on the news group. When I suggested it, everyone was like, no, it's going to be Don Henley. He's the right guy, or Ringo Starr. I'm like, no. I'm like, Nick DiVirgilio played with me and Kevin Gilbert. We did the Lamb. Here it is. And I said he's on tour with Tears for Fears. He's the ideal guy for drums for them. And so Nick Davis, their producer, saw that, and that helped him get the audition, and he played on part of the album. And then later on, when I heard that, because Nick's wife, said to me, "Did you write something on the forum?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, well, it helped him he got the gig. And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And so after that, I posted something on that news group saying, "Oh, by the way, I just want to say, those of you who are saying screw off, so I mentioned it. And I said, by the way, just to let you know, people from the Genesis camp are actually reading this." And I said, "I think that's amazing." And then Nick wrote me specifically, Nick Davis, and he said, "Not that amazing." And I'm like, "Are you Nick Davis?" And I became friends with him. Cool. So, there was this great Genesis forum that they had for a while, and he was actually on there. He's a great guy, really great guy. And so you could ask him questions and that. But I would private message him and talk about stuff and tell him what I was up to. And over the years, I was saying to him, by the way, I love Genesis, and if any of those guys want anything, I'm happy to set them up with a few things, some of the software can do this now, some of the sounds can do this. And he would say for a few years, well, they're kind of old school, they're sort of used to their systems, and thank you. And then one year, I think it was 2000, I don't know, 4, I forget, and he said, I said, "You sure you don't want it?" It's like, well, okay, if Tony could have this and Mike could have this, and they're very humble and very discerning. I'm like, dude, carte blanche. Let me. So I set them up and I gave them tips and this and that, and from there, they use our products. They use IQ Multimedia products, Sonic Reality products. We actually were. I was invited to Genesis rehearsals when they were doing their Turn It On Again.
2007.
Final. Yeah, and this was in 2006. And I was invited there just to check it out for me, for fun, and to talk to them, all three of them, Tony, Mike, and Phil, about our sounds and software. They had questions, it was like, and Tony was going to use, he didn't end up doing it, but like a racked computer with my sounds in it, which would have been great. But unfortunately at the time he wasn't trusting the computer. The computers can crash and stuff. So it's better now, but it can still crash. But using a computer live, so he used this old system from this EMU Proteus. But anyway, I was there to talk about that. And that's where I met Phil's son Simon. And that's how it kind of just,
Okay. So that leads us nicely onto your own music. You decided to get back into putting music at the forefront and recording again. Did you have in mind there that you wanted to do it solo or join an existing band or collaborate? How did you?
My dream, ironically, was to be in a band like Genesis, for instance, or Yes, or Pink Floyd, because I was mainly a keyboard player. But I was also a songwriter, like Tony Banks, for instance, wrote lyrics and songs. Wasn't sure if I, could be a singer that I liked enough. As a producer, I really enjoyed, the sort of Alan Parsons objective. I'll listen, you sing, and I'll direct it and do this and that with it to get it to sound the way I want. And it's hard to be able to judge your own vocals, objectively. And I'm picky. So I just, I did write, and I sort of had it in mind as kind of like, wouldn't it be great if, but I always thought that I was dependent on another singer to work with. So I did for many years, trying to work with different singers. And then, it wasn't until we did Dimension on with Sound of Contact, where I was significantly part of the lyrics and the music writing, and it was a keyboard-based, very largely keyboard-based band, that the reception of it gave me that missing piece, confidence. And ironically, at the same time, we had split then, after the album, after some touring, where I felt like, oh my God, like, you know what? Now I just have to do it. It's time to just,
just go for it.
Yeah, just be like, you know what? Sing your own words, and go by the fact that it's authentic because you're singing your own words. And a lot of my favorite singers or artists like Roger Waters or David Gilmour technically aren't like, amazing singers as you go by whatever criteria you judge, like Mariah Carey for, or whatever singers who can do wide ranges and pitch all the time. But more, or Bob Dylan, for instance, it's just like, but they sing with conviction. They sing their words, and that I could do, and I found my comfort zone, which is a bit sort of Floydy and a bit kind of like, the Beatlesy, the music that I like, but it just suits my voice.
That comes through in the music. There's elements of Pink Floyd, elements of Genesis, elements of the Beatles in there, along with your own particular sound.
It's my influences, and so it's the kind of music flavors I love, and at the same time, my voice kind of lends itself to that. I mean, I actually, sometimes we sound a bit like Queen, but I could not, for the life of me, compare my vocals to Freddie Mercury. I don't know too many people who can. But, I am in that sort of Gilmour comfort, tonal and pitch range.
So, when you're recording yourself and producing yourself, in fact, it's probably a very difficult task to discover and work out, am I done yet? No, I can make that better. No, I can make that better. When do you know when it's just right? Just okay, I'll just leave it at that point.
I think that's a huge part of the quality of an album and production is your ear and your sense of what it needs, what it doesn't need. And I think that's just, I don't know how I have that, but I just know that I do, and I'm confident in it. I believe in myself and my ability to just, even let's say, as you go, it unfolds. There's a belief in that. So I think it's like sometimes you just don't know, you don't have to know how it's going to end up. You have a vision for it. And then as it goes, it tells you, oh no, this song needs to be shorter, or this needs to be longer, or this needs to be more dense or less dense. And it just, I trust in this like flow of wherever it comes from, but that like I will hear it as I go to chisel away at it to get it to what I want it to be. And it might take a little while to do that, but I feel that the productions that I've released have that. And there's many, many, many productions that I've never released. Many things that I've worked on, slaved over, just to make a demo to play to a record label that no one ever heard. And things like that. So there's a lot of, trial and error that happened before these releases. Like when we did Dimension on it, I co-produced it with Simon, and Nick Davis was the engineer, the same, engineer producer who worked with Genesis. And technically, Simon had released some solo records. I had never released an album that I had produced. I had done production work, but never like an album I'd written and produced. So Nick said to me afterwards, like, "This is the first record that you've written and produced, or co-written and co-produced?" I said, "Yeah." It's like kind of like, how? I'm like, this I've been practicing for decades, doing things, and at this point,
I just led up to that.
I know what I like, no pun intended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So, over the years, the music business has changed a lot, and you're using that to your advantage now with the way you've, done your crowdfunding to record your albums. Do you think that's obviously benefited? Do you think in general it's a lot better now for musicians? Or?
No, I think it's a trade-off. The new sort of paradigm shift. There's on the one hand, there's streaming and very low royalties and a lot of just challenges for getting fairly paid for the work that you do. So it makes it difficult. And then at the same time, there's social media and crowdfunding and ways to reach the, and in fact, even the streaming services like Spotify and whatnot, Pandora, help reach people to become fans. And once they get to know you and they get into the music, there's more for them to support and buy and have, that's of interest to them. So like, for instance, I hate to say it, but like to some extent, the digital album is almost a lost leader. Meaning like it's free if you want it. You go on YouTube, you don't even have to buy it. And a lot of people don't, or let alone sharing MP3s and whatnot. But it's conveniently for $10, which is practically free on iTunes. But the interesting thing is when I do a crowdfunding campaign and I put out an album, and I've done this 3 times already. Now I'm on my 4th one with Static Live, a live album. When I tell people this, they're like, "Wait, what?" And I say, well, you look at it, the average sale of my album with all the extra swag of bonus tracks and this and that is between $55 and $100. And people are like, and so it's a complete, but the reason is because out of all the work that I've done with, let's say making a video or getting covered in Prog Magazine or whatever it is that the reach, or being on streaming services, out of all those people, there's a certain percentage of people who love what I do so much that they want to be a part of it. They want the extras. They want signed items. They want swag. They want, I come up with all sorts of fun little, collectible things like backstage passes. I always wanted backstage passes and fun things from my favorite bands. So I just think about, well, what I want, extra tracks, outtakes, and it seems to work. This balance between people who kind of want it for free and people who will pay more for something, an extra experience.
And there's that super fan element too, where you don't need to have millions of fans and be a household name, but nobody spends a lot of money. It's more important to have, say, 1,000 fans, people who
or a cult following,
love what you do and would spend $100 on whatever you release.
Yeah, where it becomes tricky in the modern age is for me. And I love this. Because the world is a smaller place with the internet, I have fans scattered all over the world, and it's fascinating to me to read reviews in Belgium and the Netherlands and all these different places, and to see people popping up and saying, "Hey, I'm from Finland," or "Hey, I'm from Australia." I'm like, "Wow, this is so cool." But of course, they say, "When are you coming here to play?" Yeah. And I'm like, "Well, that's where the other part." Where it's like that's why I do live albums. It's something that not every artist does, but so far, I did a live album after New World, then I did Static, which is my second studio album, and I'm doing Static live, the entire album performed live on Blu-ray, so that you could have this concert experience, because the band is really cool live, the songs are a bit different, and so it's in surround, and you can see it. That's, for now anyway, how I can imagine reaching everybody to say, look, it's not the same as seeing us live, but I only do like festivals or Cruise to the Edge, certain things like that, little tours in our most popular places like the UK or Germany. But I eventually I would love for it to kind of like organically grow to where we could tour the world. I mean, certainly artists like Steven Wilson show what can be done with this style of music. And he's been at it for a long time to be able to do that. But I admire artists.
One of the things that I quite like is, well, it's changed a lot, but when I was a kid, when you look bands like Genesis, the band was like aloof, you're very distant. I mean, you didn't know what was going on with them until they released an album or toured. You get a music paper once a week, like the NME or Melody Maker or something.
Right.
But there's no way you get close to the band and know anything about the band unless you went to a gig. Maybe you're lucky, get an autograph or backstage.
Right.
But I can go on the internet now and you'll be on there broadcasting live and you're just talking about what you did today or rehearsing with your band, and you've immediately made a connection with somebody, and you've got that instant rapport with people. And I think that works well.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your personality. It's not for everybody, every artist, certainly. But I think there are artists like myself and others who embrace the technology and make themselves accessible. It's a fine line, because I think, part of us wants that mystery and illusion of thinking like, wow, and put somebody on a pedestal and think like they must have the cool rock star life and not have to do with taxes and all the terrible things I have to deal with, in my life, And it's like, well, I like to and everyone in my band too, even like, let's say Durga McBroom, who was singing with performing with Pink Floyd, she's also very accessible. Fernando, we just kind of like show like, look, we're real people. This is what we do. This is what day in the life of Squids, that's my nickname, would be like. But at the same time, we create this illusion too, and it's sort of, you get a balance of like, the real person, and I think, like when you're a fan of an artist, I've always wanted to know who Genesis was, and when I got to meet them, it was kind of like, oh, cool, it's like Steve Hackett, for instance. He's my buddy. I mean, I could like,
who would have thought?
We totally get along.
Yeah.
And, we would have been, in a band back then, we even still talk about possibly doing a band.
So, Well, I was just going to ask, the work you were doing around, you did the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and I know you did some recording with Francis Dunnery. Is that going to see the light of day?
Yeah. What happened was we did Sound of Contact Dimension On. We actually did it in 2010, and then there was some behind the scenes change of management and various things sort of taking a while. So to keep myself busy as a producer, I started these tribute albums with Sonic Elements, which is basically like utilizing the samples that I was doing with Sonic Reality and saying, like a Neil Peart library, and saying, well, we've got Neil Peart's drums. Let's have fun and get different guests, and we'll do Rush, like a Rush tribute album, but with Neil Peart on drums. Yeah. So it's kind of like a fantasy band. And we did the same thing with I recorded Nick Mason with Alan Parsons, and so we do have a Pink Floyd tribute album with all sorts of guests from Porcupine Tree, like John Wesley, and different people, Francis Dunnery, and then Nick DiVirgilio had done the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway with an orchestra but without keyboards, and I went to him and Mark Hornsby, and there was some stuff that they hadn't even released as well from it, and I said, can I make a deal with you guys where I could take those tracks and put keyboards on it and get different guests and have fun and do it sort of like a different angle, which would be, in my vision, like what a film score version soundtrack, like if they had ever made a Lamb film, because they had the orchestra. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So, combining the orchestra with the old vintage keys, you get this kind of like almost like the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past blend of like, sometimes it's a mellotron, sometimes it's a real orchestra, but you get this kind of, interesting combo. So that's how that started. And Francis, and actually, ironically, we had worked with Nad Sylvan.
Oh, right.
And we recorded Chamber of 32 Doors, and that's what Nad used to get the gig with Steve Hackett.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's convenient for him.
Oh, really? Well, it'll work out well.
Yeah.
So finally, can you just tell me what the plans are? You've got Cruise to the Edge coming up.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon after that?
Well, as you may know, recently, we had a split up with Sound Contact, unfortunately, and can't play the Cruise, which ironically are two separate things. First, we couldn't play the Cruise, then all the tension in the band and everything else kind of led to, and so it is what it is. So that unfortunately now I'm in the mode of, with regard to that, is talking with Simon and the guys to see like, well, all right, fine, we'll all go our separate ways and whatnot, or we'll see what's going to happen. But what about the material? I brought in certain songs, they brought in certain songs, so it's kind of like like a divorce, and you have to figure out who gets what. But so we're working that out. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but hopefully all positive stuff at least, the best we can. And then I have another solo record that I'm working on. I've got this Static Live, Blu-ray and concert, live album. I have other projects, like I want to release all these tribute albums this year. I think this is now the time. I put them on the, the reason it's not out yet is, what happened was, so I was, doing those. I started those a while ago, like 2014 or 2012 was around the time, and then we put out Dimension on 2013, and then we were going great, and then we split up. When Simon and I split up. So then I was like, I could either release these tribute albums, or I could actually show the world that I write music and that I produce it, like not to be like, I don't want to just all of a sudden become, now he's doing tributes. It's like, I love tributes, but it's not, my main thing is songwriting and lyrics and all that stuff. So I had to kind of like, timing wise, get that done. And then once that was done, I had to kind of like, I got to do a follow-up. I can't just be like, one-off. Yeah. So now that I've finally like kind of established myself as a solo artist, I feel like, okay, I can get these tribute albums off my plate, get them out there. They're wonderful. They've got really great guests on there, including Steve Hackett and the late Keith Emerson's on there as well. So I just want to, get that done. And then I've got this mission of putting out an original album per year, one per year. I like to be prolific. I don't like to, I like, one of the things I want to do that I've learned through being in bands is that whatever you do, you have to have a captain of the ship, and it's sort of like, if when I played with Kevin Gilbert, he was the captain, and he was great at it. Like, he would just kind of like steer it in different ways, and you would just show up to the gig and it was already made for you, And so what I love about doing the solo stuff is I can be the captain of it. It's up to me, good or bad, it's down to me. And so either I'm part of a project where somebody's really on top of things and has that set up for me, which would be nice. But I don't want to wait around for that. I don't like to wait around for anybody. So to me, I'm just like, great, now that I've got this solo thing going, I'm not saying I wouldn't do other bands and stuff. I like collaborating, but I kind of feel like, well, at the minimum, I'm dedicating myself, my mission of like, catching up for all those years I didn't put out albums.
Now here's a question. If you could play in a band with any existing member of any band that's still alive, who would be in your band?
Well, ironically, Steve Hackett would be one of them, and I do already play with him. And we've even talked about making a band, which is kind of crazy. Who knows if that'll happen? But I would love to do a band with Paul McCartney or David Gilmour. If you're dreaming, you might as well dream big. But that said, I have to, admit that for me, the novelty factor of working with famous people is great, but it's not as important. What's great about working with Steve actually is that we kind of like speak the same language, and what we create, I think, is not just a gimmick. It's a real kind of like a cool collaboration that makes sense musically and has a value. But I have that with Randy McStein, with Fernando Perdomo, with Derek Cintron, with Nick DiVirgilio. So I'm not greedy. I'm actually quite humbly, grateful that I work with the people I work with. So, my dream band is the people I work with now.
Cool. All right, well, appreciate the time today, Dave. Wish you all the best for the future. Good luck with the Static, and you've got the Static Live coming out soon, and Cruise to the Edge, and thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Cheers. Thank you.